the idea is that these five new, the digitization of these processes is the new retail. So when we think about e-commerce, it's a term I'm training myself and my clients not to use anymore, because e-commerce is a place, it's a destination, it's a tool, it's a transaction, it's a way to transfer information. But there are all kinds of e-commerce. So whether you're on an Amazon marketplace or Tmall, whether it's direct to consumer, digital first, whether it's third party specialty, you have all these different things that are e-commerce.
On this episode of E-commerce Deep Dive, I speak with Michael Zakkour, founder and chief strategist at 5 New Digital. We get into the unification of commerce, the future state of major retailers, commerce ecosystems and habitats and what that means, what retailers are doing in terms of digital influence on physical, and how COVID-19 is impacting the future of commerce globally. Hope you enjoy. All right, Michael, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, John, it's good to be on with you.
Yeah, so we've known each other for a while. Whenever I think China commerce or global commerce, I always think of you. Would love to just get the audience a little bit more info on your background.
Yeah, sure. Real quick. I've been in the e-commerce world for over 20 years. I hate to date myself that way, but I started in the business about 23 years ago. I was in on the whole Web 1.0, and so my experience in retail and commerce was the reverse of what a lot of people's was, which was I was in the digital commerce space before I really knew much about the physical commercial world. And so I really kind of grew up on the Web 1.0 in the early days of e-commerce here in the US. And then I went to China in 2002 and discovered just a whole universe that was changing almost overnight. And I initially went there more on the supply side, but in 2005, I started a company called China Brightstar, and we focused on working with brands and retailers on their China consumer and digital and market strategy. And so I was literally there the year after Alibaba introduced Taobao. It was the first e-commerce site in China. eBay exited and Taobao took over. And so I've spent really the better part of the last 24 years immersed in e-commerce, digital commerce. And the key was being on the front lines in China and seeing how what we call the new retail was built by Alibaba and JD, and how I've translated that back to global commerce and working with Amazon and Rakuten and Mercado Libre. And I should also just mention that for the better part of the last decade, I ran the China, Asia Pacific, and the digital transformation practices for a company called Tompkins International. In September of 19, I launched my new company called 5 New Digital, and we are dedicated to the ideals of what we call unified commerce and the 5 new retail, new consumption, new technology, new finance, and new supply chain. And we don't talk about things like e-commerce and channels and omni-channel. We talk about things like digital commerce, ecosystems, and habitats. And so right now, roughly half my business is working with global companies on their unified commerce, digital commerce, e-commerce transformation. And the other half is working with clients from around the world on their China, Asia Pacific digital strategy.
Very good. Very good. And I know you recently came out with a book, The New Retail, where you have a pretty concise framework in terms of thinking about the next 10, 20 years. Tell us a little bit about that and kind of the companies that you think are really going to drive this digital transformation in commerce.
Sure. Yeah. So the book I wrote is called The New Retail: Born in China, Going Global. And it really was the result of me witnessing over the course of 5 years. And it started with three events, actually, that happened almost simultaneously. Jack Ma said that he was going to produce something called the New Retail, and that he was going to build the entire Alibaba ecosystem around the New Retail. A few months later, Amazon bought Whole Foods, and in that same time frame, Walmart bought Jet.com. And where I really saw the trend was the digital giants taking seriously digital finally, and the digital giants taking physical seriously, and the physical retailers taking digital seriously. And so if you think about, the headline should have read, Amazon buys Jet, Walmart buys Whole Foods, but it was the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you think about those three, now in retrospect, seismic events. That's what started me on this road to new retail. And so the idea is that these the digitization of these processes is the new retail. So when we think about e-commerce, it's a term I'm training myself and my clients not to use anymore, because e-commerce is a place, it's a destination, it's a tool, it's a transaction, it's a way to transfer information. But there are all kinds of e-commerce. So whether you're on an Amazon marketplace or Tmall, whether it's direct to consumer, digital first, whether it's third party specialty, you have all these different things that are e-commerce. But the biggest change over the last 2 years that I saw coming was where once your physical retail or wholesale operation dictated what you did with digital, it is completely flipped over now, and especially over the last 5 months with the COVID crisis. And so the interesting thing about new retail is not the elimination of physical retail. It's actually quite the opposite. Physical retail plays an extremely important role in the new retail. Just it's a new physical retail, and it's the digital that drives that strategy and that structure.
Hey everyone, John here. I hope you're enjoying the show so far. I wanted to let you know that this episode has been brought to you by Orca Pacific, the agency I founded to help brands succeed on the Amazon platform. We've just launched a new proprietary software called Carbon. It's really revolutionized what we've been able to do on behalf of our clients so far and really gotten a lot of buzz in the industry. We're doing free demos right now for brands that are interested in learning more. To schedule one of those, feel free to check out our website at orcapac.com. And with that, we'll get back to the show. You mentioned a couple of the top companies that are going to drive this transformation. Can you just kind of quickly go down the list for context in terms of the ones you think are really going to move the needle?
Yeah, sure. So some of them are obvious. So Amazon, tops in the US, Walmart, and Target. So when I started talking about this a couple of years ago, and I'd give this list to people who were listening to me speak, I say, yeah, these ecosystem builders, right? And this is the key. The companies who are doing well today and dominating and really calling all the shots are the companies that spent the time and the resources to build entire ecosystems. And I'll come back to what that looks like in a moment. But the key players are Amazon, Alibaba, in China, JD, Tencent, and even if you look at a company in China, Pinduoduo, which basically reinvented the whole idea of social commerce and group buying, maybe Rakuten in Japan, to a lesser extent, Mercado Libre in South America. But if you looked at the big ones, it's really Amazon, Alibaba, JD, Tencent, Apple, and Google may join that list sometime in the near future. But when I got to the end of the list and I say, and Walmart and Target, I got a lot of funny looks, and I still get some funny looks. Like, what what are you doing putting the words Walmart and Target in the same sentence with Amazon and Alibaba and JD and Tencent? You're a crazy person. Well, lo and behold, I kind of laid those companies out in the book last July, and it doesn't take much more than a cursory look at the stock market and the business news. Who's doing well today? It's Amazon, it's Alibaba, it's JD, it's Tencent, it's Walmart, and it's Target. And what they all had in common is they built ecosystems devoted to the idea of the new retail. And that these ecosystems are made up of habitats, or if you want to think about it as 4 power sources, and that is technology, IT, and data science as power source number 1. Logistics and supply chain is power source number 2. All commerce-facing entities, whether it's B2B, B2C, B2B2C, the actual commercial entities, whether physical or digital, is power source number 3. And power source number 4 is media and entertainment. So once again, what do Amazon, Alibaba, JD, and Tencent all have in common? In my opinion, their ecosystem is powered by those same resources.
Interesting.
Within that ecosystem, now you have these distinct habitats. So in an Amazon case, you have Whole Foods, you have Amazon Go, you have Amazon.com, you have Amazon.uk, and we could, spend an hour going down the list of assets.
So habitat is really kind of the property. It's the place where the consumer ultimately interacts with the company.
That's right.
Got it.
That's okay. Right. But the key, John, is this, okay? People think you do that through omni-channel, and you don't. Omni-channel is having all of those habitats, but largely having them act distinctly from each other, right? The idea of unified commerce is the key term there, unified commerce, right? And so with the new retail, we talk about, why are you doing this? You want to deliver what's called the 4 C's. Consumer centricity. Well, who does that better than Amazon, right?
Sure.
Everything they do is about the consumer. You want to deliver convenience. You want to deliver customization. And you want to deliver contribution, which Alibaba does better than anybody else. So how do you get the consumer to actually participate in building your ecosystem and habitats? And the way you deliver the 4 C's is through what we call the 4 U's, which is unified commerce, unified technology, unified supply chain, okay, and unified marketing. And so that's what this is really about here. When you look at, Alibaba being in the business of grocery and, their Fresh Hippo stores and having their travel agency Fliggy and being invested in the in-time department stores. So where did Alibaba put all their money the last 5 years when they were building the retail? Into physical. So they invested in the in-time department stores. They invested in the street level 1919 wine and spirit shops, right? And so what they've done is they've created the first fully integrated unified commerce system where everywhere you go in the Alibaba universe, it's all connected.
So you're essentially having the same experience with the same level of, maybe not same level, but same customization. You're the same customer, whether you're on Alibaba.com or whether you're in one of these stores, versus it being a somewhat sort of disjointed, siloed experience.
You're the same customer. You're the same customer, and everything is literally interconnected. Let me just give you one example. Sometimes this is the best way to do it. So Alibaba's Fresh Hippo stores were the first fully realized functioning new retail entities. And by the way, it's not a coincidence that Amazon and Alibaba and JD and these companies have all gotten into the grocery and food business.
Sure.
Right. So if we look what, the tip of the spear for ecosystem building was, and boy, how smart does that look now? Right. Yeah. How smart did it look, Amazon and Alibaba getting into the food and beverage business look now? Right. So when you walk into a Homa, it used to be called Homa, they changed it to Fresh Hippo. The first thing you're going to encounter is a circle of service providers. So you'll have the gym, the hair, the nails, the travel agent, the personal trainer, the dry cleaners. And after you pass through that, you pass into the store proper. And a number of things become immediately apparent to you. One, everything is cashless and all the shopping is app driven. And every product is bought through a QR code. Does that sound familiar now?
Yep.
So what did Amazon do? Would go and
Sure.
I before COVID hit, I was actually in Seattle and went to the big Amazon Go supermarket 2 days after it opened, and man, I loved it. I give it really high marks. But I also recognized a lot of the stuff that was happening inside that store had been happening in Fresh Hippo for 3 years.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So. You'll also notice that there's a conveyor belt and a chain that goes around the whole store with bags. And so people are ordering from home or their office, and these bags are going around the store and being filled through automation. And then those bags drop into a hole in the ground on the other side of the store. And beneath the store, you have a forward operating logistics space. So basically, these Homa stores are not just stores, but they are forward operating logistics space, hyper local logistics. It's why in my office in Shanghai, I can literally order 2 Yodels and a can of Red Bull at 10 p.m. on a long night in the office and have it in 15 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Interesting. Sure.
Now, that's all connected. So if I'm shopping for my lobster and my lettuce and my asparagus, and then the app tells me, here's the wine that pairs with it really well, we're sorry, we don't have any left in the store, but just click here. And that click automatically brings that bottle of wine from Tmall Global into your shopping cart. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And when the guy on the scooter leaves the staging area, he stops at the 1919 wine shop. He gets the bottle from the wine shop and he completes your order.
Got it.
What's basically happened is Tmall, Taobao, Tmall Global, Fresh Hippo, Ali Cloud, the entire logistics system. It doesn't matter whether you're in the department store, in the Fresh Hippo, you can buy everything all the time. 750 million monthly users can do all of that, and it's all the same environment. It's all the same level of service. It's all the same data. Okay?
Yeah. So that really does seem 2 or 3 years ahead of where Amazon is in the US. I mean, it's pretty clear that Amazon is pursuing something like this, but it's very kind of experimental and disjointed at this point still. You go to a Go store, you use Prime Now, you use Amazon Fresh, even, you shop just on your desktop. They're all somewhat kind of disjointed, siloed experiences. Throw Whole Foods in there as well. But basically, I mean, is it fair to say that this experience that you're describing now is because, I can't help it. I frame everything through Amazon because of my perspective.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say that you think that's where Amazon is headed with this?
Well, it's always a dangerous proposition to suppose that where Amazon is headed.
Sure,
and
fair enough.
You certainly know more about them than I do, and nobody in the world is better at saying, "Look at the shiny object in my left hand," while I'm doing my magic trick with my right hand.
You do always have to look for the other hidden kind of business model under the surface business model.
Yeah,
for sure.
I mean, look, you want to ask 225 cities to pull up their skirts for you so you can, choose them as a hometown, and you just got the deepest demographic information, more than the census would give you. That's a pretty good example, and God bless them for being so damn clever. But roughly speaking, this is where I think Amazon is generally headed. So probably 2 or 3 years behind a little bit, because really Alibaba and JD and Tencent have perfected it. Now, let's be clear. One of the things I was challenged on initially when I started showing people my galley copies, they were saying, wow, so you're saying this new retail thing was born in China and now it's going around the world. How do you substantiate that it was born in China? And that really made me reflect, because again, I do digital globally, not just in Asia. And so I had to really sit back and think about how to answer that. And so I ended up writing a whole foreword to the book to explain that. And here's what it is. Not every element of what makes up unified commerce, the new retail, ecosystems, habitats was born in China. Some of it was born through Amazon, right? I mean, Prime. Wow, nobody did that before they did.
Sure.
Skype. You could go through a laundry list of companies who created technologies, and if you want to talk about Uber and Lyft, they had that concept before China did. So a lot of the elements that make up the new retail were born in China, and just as many were born around the world. But it was there that these four companies took all those pieces and put them together first for these massive mega ecosystems that are the true first unified commerce systems in the world. And so what we are seeing is that brands and retailers who have had exposure to that, who've been in the market, who work with me, the effort is to take what you can from that, right? Because let's face it, there's only 7 to 10 companies who are going to build ecosystems of that size. Yeah. The trick for everybody else is, how do I crack the formula to operate in those ecosystems, and how do I create my own ecosystem based on that model, right?
Yep, I agree.
And so that's really what's happened. Is there were disparate pieces born around the world, but this was the first example of it all coming together. And I think that's where Walmart's going. And look at Target. I mean, my God, how many people thought 3 years ago Target would be, where they are today? I mean, they've done an amazing job. They invested an incredible amount of money into their app. It's one of the best retail apps in the world, in my opinion. They were doing, buy online, pick up in store better than anybody else, and still are. So, same thing with Walmart. It's all about these ecosystems.
Yeah, interesting. So, I'm curious, kind of your original list, you didn't include Google. Why is that?
Yeah, actually, I did not. I did put maybe I said it under my breath, but I said, and Google may be added to that list soon.
Got it. Okay.
So,
and is it because of the lack of physical infrastructure? Because they're really still just kind of a digital platform. And let's be honest, they don't really do that much in commerce. It's just hasn't traditionally been a core focus. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, obviously it's obvious, they don't have any physical, but also, listen, they've just been a little late to the game in developing their commercial infrastructures. And, can you blame them? I mean, If you look at where they were making their money on, IT, and making their money on Android, and making their money through marketing and advertising. But hey, look, I think realistically speaking, what has spurred it on in the last couple of years is, as soon as they started seeing a ton of marketing and advertising money going Amazon's way and out their door, they're in our business, we need to get into that business now, right?
Yeah. It's interesting. It's a lot easier. I don't want to say easier, but it's a lot more profitable to sell a text link on the internet than it is a bag of dog food. So
it is,
fair that they were not focused on actually
exactly. And so,
product.
You can say fair or not fair, but I think it's fair that, listen, they're one of the most innovative companies in the world. You love how they've pushed the envelope on so many fronts. But now, what I've experienced and looked at with Google over the last 2 years is they're serious about getting into commerce now. And so what I think their advantage is going to be is that their infrastructure isn't physical, but their digital properties are so ubiquitous that you're going to see Google Commerce and shopping integrated into everything that they do. So now if you think about how you apply that to Google Search, how you apply that to Google Meet, how you apply that to all of the properties they own, they're so ubiquitous on our desktops. That's one advantage that they have. that they can interconnect that shopping. I think on the back end, they're smartly looking at key partners to work with them on logistics. People don't realize, one of the great things about Alibaba and JD and Amazon is they're logistics and technology companies who happen to sell stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so really, what's their competitive advantage? And you could argue, the same for Walmart. I mean, Walmart practically changed the supply chain industry over the last 4 years. So these are logistics and technology companies who sell stuff in different habitats. So I think, that's where they're going to have a lot of work to do in, getting the logistics and the supply chain right. But they've certainly got the technology and they've certainly got the penetration. This is all about real estate, right?
Sure.
The guy who wins that 1 inch by 1 inch battle on your iPhone, right? That's what this is. It's a real estate game. And so, Google certainly has a digital real estate advantage.
Yeah, agreed. So switching gears a little bit here, and just so everyone is aware of the time frame, because things are moving so quickly these days. So it's May 5th. How has COVID impacted commerce in China over the last? Well, I guess this has been going on in China, what, 5 months at this point? How has that played out so far, and where do things stand today?
The first cases were probably, came to light in December, but it was really when Chinese people went home for Chinese New Year, as they traditionally do, around January 24th, that the government said, okay, so not only is Wuhan shut down, but you people, 600 million of you who went to your hometowns for Chinese New Year, stay there until we tell you it's safe to come back.
Yep.
And so the worst of it for them was that period between January 24th and things started to open up for them again the third week of March. So they roughly went through an 8-week total lockdown.
Got it.
Right now, commerce is healthy. Most people are back in their offices. Most factories are humming again. Life is, I don't know how we say for them or us, what is life, what does normal look like?
Sure.
But normal, means people are going to restaurants again,
okay,
but they're sitting further apart from each other and wearing masks. Well, what's interesting, John, is the ecosystems were not built for a pandemic, but they were built for a pandemic. Yeah. And I just shiver at the thought of what it would have been like in China to be locked down for 8, 9, 10 weeks and not have 15-minute delivery from JD and Alibaba.
Sure.
And imagine that. And what's the parallel here? As I'm working from home, one of my hobbies has become spending, every waking moment on Whole Foods and Peapod and Instacart getting my food delivered, right? I haven't been in a store in 5 weeks.
Sure.
Well, anybody, and I'm sure it's almost everybody who's listening, has been through that same experience the last 7 weeks. Well, why? Because what, John, 5% of groceries and household and CPG were being bought online before COVID.
Yep.
And so that system had to shift to 5 to 6% demand to 75% demand in 2 weeks. Ain't going to happen.
Sure.
Well, guess what? Those ecosystems over there were already set up to do that.
Got it.
And so they were shifting from 40 to 50% demand to 75% demand. And so what's really happened here is all the stuff that was happening in retail and commerce and digital, this is just condense it all into a 2-year sprint.
So online grocery already had a 40 to 50% penetration in China pre-COVID. I didn't realize that. That's way ahead of the US in terms of kind of shifting consumer behavior.
Yeah, well, think about this. Digital payments have a 90% penetration in China.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of that going around.
Interesting. So still a move from, let's say, 40, 50 to 75% is substantial. Have you seen stickiness so after quarantine is lifted, people go back to work, people go back to restaurants, et cetera. In China, have you seen that 75% be maintained, or did it kind of go back to already, admittedly widespread adoption, but the way it was
Yeah,
pre-COVID?
I think that the tide might recede a little bit on that. Certainly some portion of that was born of necessity. What's interesting is what we're tracking there is, where a lot of the spending is shifting over there is in two directions. And again, these were both trending for 3 or 4 years, but have been accelerated, which is anything that goes on the body or in the body is a hot property in China right now. So everything from cosmetics to goat cheese, that's a place you want to be. The other major shift in spending has been towards, for lack of a better way to put this, making your home your castle.
Yeah,
and so
sure.
A lot more spending on what we call now the developing stay-at-home economy in China. So how do I turn my home into a place where I just sleep and, make sure my kids are studying, into this is the place we may, in the future be spending, 10 hours a day here or weeks on end here. And so this spending towards home appliances, home decor, furniture, expensive stereo systems, better computers, because, traditionally, people in China will, maybe get breakfast at a food stall on their way to the subway or to their office. They'll have lunch with colleagues in a restaurant, and they'll eat dinner out with their family.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I just don't see that ever going back to full. Number two, when we talk about the stickiness, I think you have to think about what does that stickiness look like in the 20 most developed cities, as opposed to some of the second, third, and fourth tier cities. I think that you'll see a lot of new stickiness in those lower tiered cities where people who'd never engaged in e-commerce before are now doing it. I think there will be some receding of that in the bigger cities as people kind of get back to normal life. But, in a way, this has been the normal life for most people over there for the better part of 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I was trying to draw some sort of parallel, but it's almost too different to draw a parallel. I mean, the difference between what is essentially a 50% increase in, let's say, online grocery shopping, to simplify it, versus a 1,000% or 2,000% increase in the U.S. is
right.
It's just hard to kind of make that comparison. So I think one of the things that I've been looking at that I'm sure you have too is, in the US, in North America, I would say Europe as well, like how much of this change in consumer behavior that we're seeing sticks. I mean, do we go from 4% or 5% of groceries being bought online to 70% and then settle on 10? Do we settle on 30? Do we settle on 6? I mean, it's really debatable in terms of where this could go, but it's going to have massive impacts for the rest of history in terms of where this pushes us in terms of this adoption. So I don't know, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in closing a bit, that the thought is, if we look back on the entire history of history, right? Pandemics, plagues, natural disasters traditionally have impacts on societies that change them forever. Where people migrate, where people want to live, how they want to do business, how they want to work, what kind of business they're going to do. It would be counterintuitive to everything we know about global history and major impacts like this to say that things are simply going to go back to the way they were. And there's so many questions. I mean, there's a reason Netflix stock is at $4.50 right now. Will AMC ever open again? What's the airline, travel, hotel industry going to look like? Department stores and malls have been, the Walking Dead for years now. That's just going to accelerate again. I guess the most important thing we all have to think about is, what is the consumer mindset and the consumer journey going forward, and navigating what people are comfortable with what pleases them, and to say, okay, we've come out of this knowing that, digital new retail is going to play a major role, that these big companies are going to get bigger, smaller companies are going to struggle. And so the question I would ask is, what can we do in the digital realm and in the new retail realm to ensure that we're delivering that consumer centricity? Let's all ask ourselves, what does consumer centricity mean post-COVID as opposed to what it meant before? And how do we balance convenience, customization, and that centricity for them? But one thing I'd also just close on saying is the biggest effect, in my opinion, that'll be coming out of this as well, is the lines that were disintegrating between who's a retailer, who's a wholesaler, who's a brand, who's a technology company, and who's a transportation company are going to disappear faster than they were already fading.
Interesting. Michael, I think that's a great place to stop. Before we do, just tell our audience quickly how they can get your book, how they can get in touch with you, learn more about your company and what you do.
Sure. Well, this is not going to come as a surprise based on this conversation, but the one place people can get my book today is on Amazon.com.
Yeah.
It's called The New Retail, Born in China, Going Global. And if they want to get in touch with me, I love people connect to me on LinkedIn, Michael Zakkour. People connect to me on Twitter at Michael Zakkour, or they can write me an email at michael@5newdigital.com, michael@5newdigital.com.
Awesome. Michael, thanks so much for being on.
Thanks, John. I always love talking to you. Be well.
Thanks again for listening to another episode of e-commerce Deep Dive. Be sure to subscribe to your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. And if you get a chance, go in and leave us a rating. It would help a lot. Thanks again, and talk to you soon.